Carnival Personnel was recorded in a dank, moldy basement.
Joe and Jacques, it's Carnival Personnel. Joe and Jacques, to their wives this show is their personal hell. Well, the show sounds the same every single week. Pats are great, Trump is lame, and Joe barely speaks. Who you think still listening?
Who you think still listening?
Besides Jim and Biff, yeah.
And don't forget Richard.
Here's a random review. No one cares about you two, Joe and Jacques.
Joe and Jacques, Joe and Jacques, Joe and Jacques.
Hello, and welcome to Carnival Personnel Sideshow. I'm Jacques.
I'm Joe.
So, Joe, as you know, I could not be more super excited about today's guest. Super excited that you know you're doing this one with us because I'm almost giddy. About 2 years ago, I went to visit my sister at her library at the Flint Library in the great city of North Reading. Some people call it Reading. And there was a poster in the elevator about this show, 100 Years of Boston Comedy. I think I was maybe a year into this little cry for help, mid-age crisis, to starting to do stand-up. And I forget, I couldn't see it. And every time I see this guy post, he has it somewhere where I either can't get to or I have a show or I'm in LA. And so, but I've become friends with him on socials shortly around the time the lecturer started the Boston comedy radio station that just streams. If you put out a comedy album any time in Boston history, and I mean any time in Boston history, if you were a radio personality, he has it out there. And I've been trying to work out his schedule just because there's nothing in this world that you and I love more than comedy, specifically stand-up. So, you know, with that said, the former writer of Our Beloved Boston Phoenix, been with the Boston Globe for maybe 20 years now.
I'll be 25 in June.
Oh, you get less time for killing a guy. With that said, please, big Carnival Personnel welcome for Nick Zaino.
And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Dude, so seriously, let's ask right out of the gate. Have you always loved comedy?
Yes. Ever since I was a kid, obviously everybody started out loving Bill Cosby before we knew the problems. But I listened to Bill Cosby. I also had, I found 78s in my grandparents' attic. So I was the only kid who was listening to Andy Griffith's. What it was football and the Dragnet 78s, and no one else in my 5th or 6th grade class really understood that. I was the only one, I think, who brought Inside Shelley Berman to listening and to listening parties in grade school. So, you know, at one point I wanted to be Steve Martin, watching him on Saturday Night Live and all those great movies when I was a kid. So it's always something that I loved, and I never quite thought I would be this sort of deep into it for a living.
You said you wanted to be Steve Martin. We named our podcast after a quote from the seminal Steve Martin movie, The Jerk. Mm-hmm. Like when, you know, he's being chased by Emmett Walsh, and he ducks into the traveling carnival grounds.
Right.
And there's a sign that says "Carnival Personnel Only." And Emmett Walsh looks at it and goes, "Damn!" And he won't let himself in the grounds and then he's yelling, "Hey, you're not Carnival Personnel."
He's not Carnival Personnel.
Right.
You're not Carnival Personnel. Come on, hey, he's not Carnival Personnel.
Walsh was so great. Everything he ever showed up in.
Oh, well,
he was just so good.
I mean, I was going to say we could, but Gilbert Gottfried beat us to it a decade ago, just do a podcast based on the Emmett Walshes of the world. But I got to congratulate you, Nick. Seriously, this is episode like 405 or 6 of our podcast. That is the quickest Bill Cosby reference we've gotten to. Like, I think I was under 12 seconds.
Right off the bat.
Oh, well, I mean, a comedy as a kid was Bill Cosby when I was growing up. And it's unfortunate that that's tainted for people now, because the work was great. But
my mom and dad got divorced when I was 6, and my dad, he didn't have many possessions, but the few he had left behind, and they were all these, I would call them country classics, you know, but it was 74, so they were country albums, like they, you know, and it wasn't classic yet, and all his comedy albums, of which were 4 or 5 Bill Cosby ones, and I have not put on and listened to Why Is There Air in maybe 40 years. I can quote it verbatim start to finish now. I mean, wore out groove. So yeah, I mean, it's sad that, like, you know, he's a monster beyond all kinds, but yeah, at the same time, so many of us, we're kind of in the same age group. Like I said, you're a few years younger than me, Joe's a few years younger, but it's still in that realm. And the same thing, it's like Steve Martin, I just, again, same. You know, just growing up, I just lived on television and lived on comedy. And, you know, this is before HBO and the great HBO, you know, specials that, you know, brought like Carlin and Richard Pryor into my world. But it's like I had, comedy. And I just gave it to my friend Wayne Russell as a joke. Well, not a joke. I found it at a record store, but I gave him the Comedy Isn't Pretty album.
Yeah.
As a, you know, because Joe and I have a friend, Dante the comic, out in LA, a national comic, and he talks about that all the time, that he suggests going to used record stores, you know, and just see what's in these bins, you know, educate yourself, you know, on these, you know, and they touched on it a great deal in Saving and Miss Maisel. It's like people would just have dinner parties and cocktail parties and put on the new this album or that album, and it is all out there. Like a Mom's Mabley. Like I was in New York a couple of years ago. Was in a Bowery. My son was looking for certain things, and I walked out of there with maybe a dozen of these. Just didn't play very well. Like you know, I mean, but so much of that stuff, because of what you could and couldn't say, would hold up today. Mom's Mabley has this great routine about getting, you know, held up at gunpoint. That is so, like, you could use it today. Anyway, so you growing up on those record albums, and where was home? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bloomfield, New York, just outside of Rochester.
And
Rochester.
I want to
Rochester.
mention about the record collecting, and specifically comedy record collecting. I interviewed Jeff Abraham on Boston Comedy Radio, because he's a big comedy historian. He was Carlin's PR guy. I got to interview Carlin 3 times, and he was the one who set up all of those. But he's a big collector. He probably has the biggest comedy collection maybe in the country. I don't know who else would have a bigger collection than him, but what he says about it is the best thing about comedy record collecting is it's not a terribly expensive hobby. Because all of those albums, there are very few albums that are going to cost you a lot of money. Like I think I paid maybe $40 for Lenny Clark's 1981 album, but that's only because they used to use them at target practice at the bunker. Like there aren't a lot of them left because, you know, Lenny and the guys weren't terribly mindful of legacy. No. Those things.
Were
coming out. But you can go to a record store and find a lot of $5 or $6 albums that are wonderful. I've got a stack of them like next to me that I need to digitize.
It's Joe comes to all the fun shows with me. Like, when I, when I have to, and they're all fun, but if I'm hosting for McHugh's, Smitty's movie theater up in Sanford, Maine, which is 3 hours away, like, yeah, Joe takes a pass on that one. But I did Off Cabot, a couple months ago. And I don't know if you've been to the downstairs at Off Cabot, but
Yeah.
the green room down there, the walls are just littered with framed pictures of all these amazing comedy albums. And I'm like, if there's a good thing there isn't like a Murphy bread there, because I would have just set up shop. That would, good luck getting me out of there. Like, good luck getting me out. It was nothing made us happier of all the cool places that I've got to go to just sit down there and just look at all of those. Yeah, because I mean I'm old. It's funny because this is like 30 years ago because of the sense of humor. I think Joe would classify me hack Joe. That's a category you? I'm not like observational humor. I'm assertive. I'm a hack. But there was a guy on my team who just looked at me and he's like, Chuck, you should have been born Jewish 50 years earlier. Like the killing you would have made.
Hit the Catskills, that kind of thing.
Oh,
is that way?
exactly.
You and Mousy Lawrence.
100%.
Yeah, but back then you would be taking jokes from 50 years prior.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you'd be doing even older jokes. You wouldn't be with the modern trends.
Yeah, I'd be rehashing
There'd be a lot of like
shit.
butter churn kind of like in World War I references. Yes.
But yes,
Rich Scheidner has a great he has a great book out on the history of stand-up comedy, and he also, I don't know if you follow him on social media, but he does these great like 1 minute clips and he has one about who was it? It was like Milton Berle doing a show with a bunch of younger comics in like maybe the late 70s or something, and there's a little feedback on the mic. And he looks up and goes, "Gee, I hope that's one of ours." And like Scheidner turns to whoever it was next to him, and did he just do a save from World War II? If you're a comedy fan, you've gotta watch Rich Scheidner's stuff. He's great.
Well, I think the peak of comedy and comedy on television, and we can debate this, but I'm putting the greatest 2 minutes of comedy history is Waldorf and Statler heckling Milton Berle.
Hey, Burl.
What?
You know what? I've just figured out your style.
Really?
You work like Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck's not a comedian.
Well,
Now, just a minute, please. I have been a successful comedian half of my life.
how come we got this half?
Look, did you come in here to be entertained or not?
That's right.
What's right?
We came in here to be entertained, and we're not.
When people have their favorites of favorites, it's like I might be the only one who has Waldorf and Statler as their favorite comedy duo of all time.
Well, the Muppets was very formative for me. I mean, maybe before any stand-up. You see the Muppet movie, and maybe Fozzie the Bear might be the first like exposure you have to stand up as industry. But there's also that whole like optimistic thing that the Magic Store, life's like a movie, write your own ending, and the idea of community.
Yes.
Like the Muppets were really, really important, and I still love the Muppets and still watch them a lot. But also that Muppet movie, you think about who was in that. As a young impressionable kid, you're seeing Steve Martin and the whole "Would you like to smell the bottle cap?" scene. You're seeing Richard Pryor selling balloons. You're seeing Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. You're seeing Milton Berle. You're seeing Mel Brooks. All of these people, and it made me curious as a kid, like, who are all of these people? And it didn't take me long to get from the Muppets to Steve Martin and Richard Pryor and especially Mel Brooks, and just start exploring, and that would lead to other things like, in seventh grade, I'm listening to Robin Williams live at the Met, which I don't think I don't know that my parents would have loved me listening to that if they knew it was on it.
Well,
But
I have said because, I stopped counting, but it's at least 8 or 9 nose breaks that I've had. And I remember when my wife was first pregnant, and she's like, "Oh my God, I hope he has your eyes and this and that, not your nose." And I said, It's not the nose. You don't want him to have the mouth that led to the nose, because, as I have said, as a young child, as an impressionable little boy in Wilmington, Massachusetts, picking Don Rickles as a role model, ill-advised.
yeah,
Ill-advised, because that's, I grew up playing hockey as a small kid, and my mouth on and off the ice has relentlessly got me in trouble. And truly, Mr. Warmth, Don, and then, mine and Joe's happy place. If my wife goes out of town at his, he'll come over. We will watch, I don't know, like 8 back-to-back episodes of Bob Newhart show. And the fact that between Bob Newhart, I think that is, and I hate to say it, I'm gonna name another person we shouldn't, but Woody Allen put out an album in '59. And I think Joe and I, that was the road trip that Joe and I take. I think I had that one with me too. Again, how much of that you could play today? Like not dead. I mean, there's dated references and stuff like certain things, but Bob Newhart's, the button down mind of Bob Newhart, between listening to that over and over and over, and getting my hands on anything as you could, pre-internet, as like a 10, 12, 13-year-old with Don Rickles in it. But yes, being educated by those guys. But now back to you. So you grow up outside of Rochester. First of all, big fan of the Rochester Americans, were you?
uh, I guess I think I went to maybe a couple of games on field trips and stuff. I didn't become a sports fan so much until maybe a little bit later.
And where did you go to college?
I went to the University at Buffalo, the
Oh,
SUNY school. So
hey, wait, may I ask what years you went there?
I was there from 91 to 96. I took an extra year because I changed majors.
So if you were one of the cool kids, if you were one of the cool kids at SUNY Buffalo, and you were hanging out at the college radio station in '94, you might have been part of the people who brought my band out there to play. I don't, it was '93 or '94. We played it, and it might have been the biggest paying gig my band had. I think we got $750 to come out there. And it was a Saturday night, and we played, a bar the night before, right next to where the Bison play. For people who don't know Buffalo, it is akin to Hartford, Connecticut, where it shuts down at 5 o'clock Friday night, and there's nothing downtown Buffalo.
Well,
Like,
did you take the subway?
no,
Which was one car,
yeah,
basically, or I think it was two cars, but it was basically a straight line,
yeah.
From South Campus at UB to downtown and back. And there was a big kerfuffle over whether they should bring it closer out to the suburbs, but people like, oh, the people from the city are to come out and I don't know, rob us or some stupid.
Yeah. Well,
it
that's
was
usually
really
the
a
fear.
dumb.
yes. So when my mom and dad got divorced, my dad decided his happy place was going to be Union Road in Cheektowaga. So I went out to Cheektowaga every summer for a couple weeks, all growing up. So I know that area. And then when my, dad, anyways, I liked it. I like that area is special to me. And anyway, so 95, you're graduating, and what made a world in front of him, stars in his eye, young Nick Zaino say, Boston is the place for me.
Well, it was a relationship that did not work out. So that was I followed my then fiance, who was not my fiance for very long, out here. But I would say things worked out. Uh,
Yeah.
not long after that, but yeah, that's what, I mean, there were a lot of different places I could come. I had a lot of friends in this area as well who had moved from Buffalo to Boston. I still, I actually oh, excuse me. I kind of owe my marriage to those connections because I was walking down the street with a friend of mine from Buffalo, uh, and we happened upon the guy who was the lead singer in the band that I was in back home, and the friend that I was with started talking to him, and I didn't know they knew each other. So they talk for a few minutes, and then I sort of push my head over and say, "Hey, Mike, I'm also here." Like, and he was like, he hadn't even looked over at me, like, "Oh my God." So it turned out that the lead singer and the guitarist of the band that I was in, because both of our the guitarist's dad and my dad both worked at Kodak, and that's how we we met. They were both here, and they were both playing at the Burren open mic on Tuesday nights, Hugh McGowan's famous open mic. And they said, "Hey, you should come out to this open mic and play a couple of songs." And that's where I wound up meeting my wife, who's also a
Oh,
musician, and we were tuning our guitars in the back and started talking about Texas singer-songwriters. So
oh man.
I sort of owe a lot to that connection.
The the sadly late great Hugh McGowan.
Yeah.
Very, 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 Joe, you won't know this. It's not a name that's come across your plate. Very quickly to, not veer off comedy too long. I think Hugh's last performance, one of the last things that my band played, our old bass player, Sean, had started hanging out with Hugh, and the two of them did a set before our band the bass player, he played in our band too. But yeah, so I met you. Wow, what a tiny world, Nick. That's
Well,
great going way back.
I will say, Paul Hansen is the guitarist, and he's in a band called the Grown Up Noise, which provides the theme song now for the interview show that I do on Boston Comedy
That
Radio.
is I love that. So we'll have to do another podcast where we talk about all the places you played that are no longer with us, like Bun Ratty's the Rat and stuff like that. But so back to comedy. How did you wind? So did you come? When you left SUNY Buffalo? Was being a comedy correspondent in the horizons, in the cards? Did you have a comedy show at the radio station out there? I mean, how connect those dots?
Well, I did have a radio show. It was a music radio show called The Hamburger Train. It was a Primus instrumental, about 8 minutes, so I could use that as the opening. And it starts out with a Cheech and Chong quote. "You're the guy from the Hamburger Train," and then it goes into this instrumental. So those were the words that opened up my show on WRUB for a couple of years. And when I graduated, I got into book editing for a very disreputable firm, and eventually started working at an online portal, which is something that's probably a phrase people these days would not necessarily know. But I mean, when the internet was spreading, each city would have like a portal, what's going on in town and stuff. So I called myself the editor in chief. They hired me to do this Buffalo City portal, but it was really an internet service provider that hired me. So I was just in the back room with all the servers trying to put this stuff together. And then the Buffalo News needed somebody to cover comedy, so I started covering comedy for the Buffalo News. I was interviewing people like Angel Salazar and Christopher Titus, who were coming through town. A lot of road dogs. So I got that sort of education as well, that comedy wasn't just what you see on TV. It wasn't this thing where you're in show business and you're appearing on Carson, and then you're in movies, and then you're recording a special. I got to see that there was this sort of class of comic that just lives out of their cars and plays the Wednesday to Sunday shows and then drives for a couple of days and keeps doing that. So then by the time I got to Boston, I started working in the web department as a spectacularly mediocre web designer. And then I started just pitching comedy stories because I could just walk over to the editor and say, "Hey, this Dane Cook kid's sort of blowing up and he's playing the Comedy Connection this weekend," or early on, George Carlin has a new special out and he's doing press. Do you want an interview with George Carlin? It was like my first big, like world famous interview, uh, which was fun and a little bit nerve wracking because it was You Are All Diseased. Do you remember that special?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Where he has like this giant anti-corporate screed but he was doing long distance 10-10-220 phone commercials at the time as well. So I had to, the technology has gotten a little better, but I'm sitting there with a giant cassette tape recorder next to my speakerphone interviewing George Carlin and had told my roommates, please don't come upstairs maybe for the next hour or so. Just, give me the time to do this. And sort of, George Carlin's voice is coming out of my phone. What's going on with my life? How is this a thing that's happening? But I had to ask him, on the new special, you have this giant anti-corporate screed. And also you're doing commercials for a long distance company.
Hey, did you ever notice sometimes on your phone bill it says payment received, thank you? Well, what are they thanking you for? You didn't send them the money out of the goodness of your heart. You did it because you don't want to communicate with drums and carrier pigeons for the rest of your life. Hey, if there's any thanking to be done, it's you who ought to be thankful for 10-10-220. When you dial 10-10-220, you pay only 99 cents for all calls up to 20 minutes and just 10 cents a minute after that. Anytime, any day. It's a good deal. Someday you'll thank me.
So how do you reconcile that? So I left that as almost the very last question, and just in case he told me to F off and hung up, so I would have everything else in case. And he didn't.
Smart. That's smart journalism right there.
Yeah, but he said it didn't rile him at all. He was, as far as I could tell from the couple times I got to speak with him, very, very laid back individual. And he said, well, I had a lot of tax problems and my wife died of cancer and I had a lot of hospital bills. And I went to my agent and said, what wipes this out all at once? And he said, do a couple of commercials.
Wow.
And so that was the explanation. I thought, well, you know what? Was it hypocritical? Yeah. Am I going to hold that against a guy who spent time in jail for free speech and whose life's work was a roadmap for how to be a comic? I don't think you can hold that against him. He got in trouble and he got out of trouble, and that was it.
Joe, we're gonna do a quick self-indulgent joke, please. I'm queuing you up to do the Woody Allen bit.
Oh, the self-indulgent theater.
Yeah, here we go.
Right. On the Woody Allen stand-up album that Jacques referenced, there's a bit where he gets Woody Allen gets like a phone call from like an alcoholic, like a what is it, like a wine company or something like that. And he says, he gets pitched like, do you want, we're interested in having, you do this commercial. You seem to be an up and coming voice, and we definitely want to have you in our commercial. And he's indignant, and Woody Allen goes, I would never do a commercial like of that nature. I don't sell myself out to just any corporation, or I have high standards. I consider myself like a new voice and all this stuff. And the agent on the phone says, it pays $100,000. And then Woody Allen goes, "Oh, hold on. Let me get Mr. Allen on the phone."
Right. Well, I mean, the commercial stuff was that goes back a long ways. We had using comedians as pitch people. I mean, Bob and Ray had a whole division of their business that was just doing commercials. They did beer commercials in character. That was a whole other line of revenue for them. So there was comedians and commercials sort of.
Yeah, well, all those shows, the radio shows were all sponsored by that, and TV.
I do want to eventually, maybe we should kind of skip forward to the meat of the subject.
Yeah.
The big 100 years of Boston comedy.
So you're at the Phoenix, and now you're doing that. And when do you decide, you know what, the history in this city is beyond anything else you compare it to when it comes to stand up? How do you put together what was the catalyst? What was the moment where you woke up one day and said, "Yeah, I want to do this 100 years of Boston comedy"?
Well, I'd been covering comedy for a long time, going back to the Phoenix, and then in 2001 I started with the Globe, and for a long time I thought I should write the history of Boston comedy, and I sort of perseverated about it a bit because where do you start? What's going to be interesting to people. And for the longest time, I just sort of was in that sort of stasis of trying to figure out what this project would be. And eventually I was talking to a friend a little while ago, and I said, I think eventually I thought, well, maybe someone smarter can write the history of Boston comedy and figure out how to do this. And then I thought, well, someone smarter wouldn't do this. So it's it's up to me to do that. And a couple of years ago, I've been playing guitar and singing a little bit with my friend Matt York, who's a great musician, in his Outlaws tribute show, doing Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash and Chris Christopherson songs. And he made that a business for himself. He does lectures and shows where he tells stories and plays songs from those guys, from the Highwaymen. And he said, you really should do something, with comedy. And I thought about it for a while and I didn't know exactly what I would do, because it's not like I'm going to go out and perform comedy at libraries and senior centers and things. So what would that be? And then I came back to the idea of the history of Boston comedy. And then when I started looking, okay, how early does this start? I started looking around vaudeville. Vaudeville starts to get popular around the turn of the century, and one of the maybe the first big name in comedy from Boston would be Fred Allen, who became popular around 1922, 1923, when he goes to New York, and he comes back and he's got the Passing Show of 1922. So that just set up, okay, that's 100 years. I mean, I go back a little bit further than that, to 1894, and even to, the Puritans, who were not funny people, and how it's kind of a miracle that anything funny happened in this region. But we've got this sort of mix of, we're going to rebel by being even more conservative than you in our beliefs. Like, that's where sort of the Puritans were at. Like, you can't tell us to be free and open. We're going to go to the New World and start. So that there's that weird friction that we have in New England, and the going back to the old Bay Colony.
Well, it's funny because I just recently found out, it's like, the whole myth that they came here for religious freedom, and, they had left like, England, and they were set up in like Denmark or Norway, maybe it was Denmark, for a good decade plus, where they did have religious freedom, but they wanted religious freedom, meaning freedom from any other religion but theirs. They didn't want like people.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, we're going to leave you alone and let you do what they want. So that's why they came here to, only have that religion. And it was not as you put in your special, not a very tolerant,
No, I mean there were probably, it wasn't necessarily a monolith. Once more people started coming, there were more ideas bouncing around. But there's a maybe the second most specific book I've ever seen, because I did once see a book called The Swedes of Greater Brockton, which is a very, very specific book. But maybe after that, the most specific book that I found is called Laughter in the Wilderness, which is about humor in pre-colonial America, which is a very rarefied sort of subject. And I hadn't thought about it this way, that to a certain sect of Puritan, laughter was against God's plan. Because if somebody stumbled in the street and fell, like the classic Henri Bergson sort of thing, and you laughed at that, it was God's plan for that person to fall and hit themselves. So if you're laughing at that, you're laughing at God's plan.
Yeah, that tracks. That makes sense. Yep. Okay.
But at the same time, that's sort of, you might wind up literally pilloried for something like that. But at the same time, I have a hard time believing everybody in America at that time was like that. I mean, there are enough people with that like church laughter kind of thing, like where you're trying to. What was it? Was it Carlin that had the whole thing about trying to not laugh at church?
Yeah.
Or was that Robert Klein? But that sort of forbidden laughter thing. I feel like there had to have been some people who were laughing anyways, or there might have been a public acceptance of, all right, well, this is what the town thinks, but screw the town. That was funny.
The Lenny Bruce of Puritan America.
Yeah,
the person who laughed.
Yeah, just he was the first one, or you could have the Mort Saul of Puritan, the comedy. He was the first one to take the buckle off and just use the Poor Richard's Almanac.
or the George Carlin of the era with the 17,000 words you can't say at the town square routine. It was very long, but holds up today too. I mean,
the routine was more like the 500 words that you were allowed to say, and the rest of them not so much. And it depends on the order as well. But so there is that 100-year block sort of cemented things for me. Like, okay, if we start at Fred Allen, we give a little bit of a preamble about, the humor in the region and vaudeville and, the B.F. Keith Theater in 1894, and how vaudeville was the sort of the dominant. Vaudeville kind of created modern live entertainment from the types of acts you see, which would have been like what YouTube is now. You could see a comedian, interesting acts. Like if you go into the Boston Globe, you can go into their archives and see the ads. So you can see the ads for what would have been playing at B.F. Keith's Theater. And sometimes it's like Jessica, the lady baritone. She sings a little lower than a woman usually sings. Like, all right, that must have really blown your hair back in 1901. But that, there was that. There was the sort of the idea of working blue comes from B.F. Keith's Theater, because you would get a blue letter that said the things you had to strike from your act. Cliff Nesteroff has a great book called The Comedians that talks about that. So you go from Fred Allen. All right, who's next? Bob and Ray are next. They start out in 1946 in Gloucester on WHDH, and then shortly after that, Tom Lehrer
But I want to talk about Ray for a second because
Yes.
I mean it's like there's just so many things, and I don't want to say lost to history, but
Mhm.
but how brilliant they were, and it's one of those things again, and we just joked about like things that aren't dated, and how much
Mhm.
of their stuff just with the slightest tweaks would work today. I
Maybe we should
love
do like a quick primer on who Bob and Ray
yes,
were, because Bob, they're not exactly household names to a lot of the,
right.
modern crowds. Bob and Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob Elliott and Ray Goulding,
Mhm.
um, both Boston area natives, right?
Mhm.
Bob Elliott, the father of Chris Elliott, who went on to become himself a comedic genius on Letterman and Get a Life, one of the greatest sitcoms ever, Jacques, right? Of course. We should do a podcast about Get a Life one of these
I will
days.
punch you if your wife lets you have your nuts back. I will kick you in them.
But Bob and Ray, right? When did they form? Like back in the late 40s, like just post World War II kind of era?
They met on WHDH in 1946. Uh, Bob
46.
was already working there. He was doing the station was one of its main functions was to give price reports to fishermen at sea, so they knew what they would be selling for when they got back to shore. Uh, and they when Ray joined the staff, they had him just go in and sit with Bob when he was doing that report. But they liked each other, so Bob would also do music shows. Like he would do sometimes live segments from downtown, different places. But he had an afternoon music show, so Ray hung around there, and they just started to sort of talk on the air, and they found eventually that they enjoyed doing that, and that became the show eventually. So that was they worked together from 1946 to 1987.
I mean, seriously, any relationships, how many companies last that long? A relation that's insane. And because at that point, gosh, if they got together in 46, they're probably like early 20s. So they're
Mhm.
working from their early 20s almost to their 70s as a team,
Yeah, and it
which
was all right up until just maybe I think maybe a year before Ray's death. So,
oh,
and part of it, I guess, is they weren't in each other's social lives terribly deeply. I mean, they were friends, but they weren't inseparable, and
well,
that
yeah.
maybe helped.
No, it's interesting because there's lots of things. I just saw this great documentary about these two brothers who wrote every Disney song for like 40 years. Like
The
they would
Sherman Brothers, right?
Sherman Brothers.
Mhm.
Um, the documentary basically they had no. They would see each other at the office, go the other ways. And in this documentary, their kids they barely know their cousins. Like they all grew up in LA, but barely knew their cousins because they just ran in different circles. So maybe that's it. But so when you're putting this together, I want to get to um, oh gosh, what's the right way? I mean, as you're researching, what were the things that as a kid growing up in upstate New York, you know, you would have had no idea what was going on in Boston at places like the Ding Ho and stuff like that, or BCN Radio, or this
Mhm.
counterculture thing. So as you're getting into this, was there something that that at one point you're like, oh my God, I give anything to have a time machine and just go and just be a fly in the wall to see this? And was there anything that
Well,
really stood out?
there's a lot of things in there. I mean, I would have loved to have heard Bob and Ray on the radio.
Yeah,
And if you want, I can talk about why I think their humor sort of permeates
please.
comedy today.
Yes.
Well, it really sort of clicked for me because there's a great book. I forget who the author is. It's on the shelf behind me about Bob and Ray, and I have an extra copy if anybody wants one. It David Letterman did the introduction for it, and of course, you know that Chris Elliott uh, was on David Letterman's show, so there's that sort of legacy. But hearing Dave Letterman talk about listening to Bob and Ray as a kid and thinking, all right, well, there's kind of a Midwestern sensibility here to this. There's a gentility and an absurdity to it. And it clicked to me like what Bob and Ray were doing uh, after they sort of maybe not right from 1946, but eventually when they started to sort of codify what they were doing. That is uh, David Letterman is kind of a direct child of that. That sort of absurdist, that gentle absurdity, doing things like I mean, of course, there's also Steve Allen works his way into that as well for Letterman, but there's a certain not necessarily deadpan but close sort of thing that they're doing where you take everything on face value and do something completely silly and never acknowledge the silliness of it. That runs directly to David Letterman, which influenced countless comics, and runs, I mean, you can't run any more directly than into Chris Elliott, who also had an influence in sort of an alternative uh, comedy in that sort of era. So I feel like Bob and Ray worked themselves into modern comedy in some sort of deceptive ways. Um,
Well, like, right, they presented themselves as sort of, I mean, they were doing parody, so they
yeah,
would present themselves and frame their bits as if they were presenting, a true news report, like the man on the street stuff with Bob Elliott.
Well,
Um,
as you point out in your thing, it was not the straight man punchline guy. They were
yeah,
both the straight man
yeah.
in their presentation, which that shouldn't work.
Right. Well,
Two
they
straight
could
men
do,
working off each other.
well, they could each do sort of silly voices and things, and they played a number of characters, and especially when you started getting into the what was the soap opera? Um, I'm trying to remember. They had a soap opera, but they also had things like Monongahela steel ingots, and that they just presented as if they were a household item that everybody bought. And then there's the fly paper. What was the name of the fly paper? I'm forgetting the name of the fly paper, but the tagline was the generation the fly paper you've gradually come to trust
Einbinder.
over the course. Was it?
Einbinder.
Einbinder fly paper, the company you've gradually grown to trust over the course of three generations. So you look at that on the face of it, like, why did it take people three generations to trust fly paper? And is that three generations of people at the company, or is that has your family been for three generations? Was Grandpa like, I don't know about Einbinder fly paper? Like you start thinking about this stuff, like what the hell are they talking about?
Right, like the
And it
way the
was
way they present, like, just the corporate cynicism of, like, like all these sponsors and everything. Like, it's, yeah, right. It's an angle that probably wasn't heavily explored. I'm not familiar with, like, the act, like all of their bits, but were, like, vaudeville were mostly presented in front of an audience,
Mhm.
right? And they would feed off of an audience immediate laughter and reaction and stuff. So they'd be playing to a crowd, like those vaudeville bits would be playing to a crowd. Whereas Bob and Ray where they were like, when the Beatles stopped touring and just started producing albums,
Yeah.
and,
Well, they did play live a couple of times, and they didn't. Well, more so they did the Carnegie Hall show. They did more later, but early on they got put on shows with one I think in Buffalo where they got put on first before like oh no, they had a rock and roll show open up for Bob and Ray, and they're like everybody was there for the rock and roll show. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. So they didn't do live for a long time. But yeah, it just worked because they were amusing each other, and eventually they brought in a couple of writers who did some great stuff.
but they were different than, say, like Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks, where they would do the 2,000-year-old man routine, but it would be a touring thing. Like, that would be something that they would, it would play to an audience, right?
Yeah, well,
Whereas,
the 2,000-year-old man started as a party game,
yes.
so that was just them amusing people at parties.
Right. Whereas the Bob and Ray stuff were just like they were self-contained. They were so
Yeah.
there's this kind of a vacuum that they were working in where it's an isolated environment. There was no outside interference. They weren't influenced by an audience's reaction. So it was like a fully kind of scripted piece and presented as such, right? So
Yeah, I mean, well, it was some of it was scripted, some of it was them off the cuff. I think more later on it was definitely more scripted, but you can hear some of the early stuff with just them, which is fun. It's not quite as you don't get quite as many punchlines per minute in that early stuff, but it's fun to hear them make each other laugh and try not to break up because it's spontaneous and somebody says something unexpected. Uh, but I'll get to more of the question you asked about things that I wish I was a fly on the wall for. There's a lot. I would love to have seen Rusty Warren at the surf club in Revere. I would love to have seen Tom Lehrer play live because he's another guy whose stuff holds up. We just lost him earlier this year, but his stuff is still. And there's an act out of Pennsylvania called Honest to Betsy that did a Tom Lehrer Tuesday on her Instagram every week, and she's coming to Passim in January, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Do you know who she is, Joe? Honest to Betsy?
No.
Okay. Your wife might like her as a follow if I'm thinking the right person now that I'm saying out loud. Her costuming is exquisite. She dresses to the nines, and she'll play an album from like 1923 that is so vulgar. and she plays along, but she's dressed in that period piece and the look of horror as she realizes what the song's about, and that's so much of her persona online. But she plays these old records that people don't know exist. I mean, these really dirty things.
Well, and she played Rusty Warren. Of course, there's Bounce Your Boobies.
Yeah.
Big fat cigars. Big fat stomachs. And just where they should stick out, where is it? Yes, girls, we know what we've got and we know what they're worth. So come on, gals, let's get into the swing of things. Give your boobies some freedom. All together now. Bounce your boobies, let 'em rock and roll. Nut your knockers, keep 'em hot and sold. Just admit it, gals, it sure feels great to feel them swinging. Ooh, titillate. Bounce your boobies.
And Knockers Up was the song that made her famous.
Which is funny because I think, and I don't know with no research because 400 plus episodes, why start a bad habit now? I think in Miss Maisel, like the code, like to between her and her manager was tits up, which I think was an homage to that. Yeah. Like that was their little code. There's like, oh, this show's gonna suck, but hey, we have to do it X, Y, C. All right, let's get in there. Tits up,
Yeah, there was definitely a nod to Rusty Warren. That character is an amalgam of a bunch of people, but that's definitely. It would have been fun to see her play. I would have loved to have seen at another club in Revere when Jay Leno did one of his early shows, and he says the owner of the club told him not to wear his good clothes. And it's like, what do you mean? No, this is a club show. I want to dress nice. So he put, he had one of his best jackets on, and the audience was flicking lit cigarette butts at him and burned a hole in the shoulder of it. So when I told that story, because that's part of the 100 Years of Boston Comedy presentation that I do, and I told that story in Quincy, a guy came up to me afterwards and said, that was our table. That was flicking the lit cigarette butts at Jay Leno. And he said, and Jay came over, and I opened up this other guy at my table opened up his coat and showed him a full pack of cigarettes, and he backed off, which seems slightly apocryphal to me. But as it happens, just a couple months after that presentation, I was interviewing Jay Leno I said, hey, not for nothing, but I do this presentation, and somebody came up to me after the show and said that you came to their table, and a guy opened up his jacket and showed you a full pack of cigarettes, and you backed off. And he said, well, that sounds more than a little apocryphal, but he couldn't quite deny it outright. So it's one of those things that, yeah, it sounds like too perfect a story to be true, but in like that showbiz mythology, you kind of want it to be true.
Yes, yes. There are many of the apocryphal stories told on the Gilbert Gottfried Amazing Colossal podcast. Like there's
Yes.
just you just want those stories to be true.
But there's a lot of things in Boston comedy history I would have loved to have seen. I would have loved to have seen one show at the Ding Ho just to see literally what that was about. There's some footage of some shows that's kind of grainy. I'd have loved to have seen. I have a tape of Cross Comedy with David Cross at the Catch a
Mm.
Rising Star that I've been told to burn. Uh,
Oh, but
nobody
told
wants
by
it.
who?
By David Cross. I
Yes.
told him because I have this tape that was given to me by Robin Horton, who used to manage Catch a Rising Star. He was the booker there, and so yeah, But I would love to have been there to sort of look around the crowd. That's something that I'd like to have seen. That's just the reaction to some of the stuff, some of the weirder stuff people were doing, or the more outrageous stuff people were doing. As much as I'd love to see the act itself, I'd also like to look around and see people's faces and see. I'd have loved to have been at the show where there's a story in When Stand Up Stood Out about how Colin Quinn thought Boston was going to be his go-to like second city, like that was going to be a second home for him. Then he got here and they introduced him as a comic from New York, and then suddenly the whole crowd was like, yeah, uh-huh, sure.
Mm.
And they were standoffish for the whole thing, to the point where uh as as Quinn tells it, Joe Yannetti had to like get out in front of him, and he had to be escorted out of the place.
Oh, geez.
So
That
Joe
doesn't sound
was
like Boston. I don't know what you're talking
How
about.
dare you? How dare you, sir? How dare
What's the I'm curious, what is in your research? What's the oldest recording you found of Boston performed comedy? Like how far back does it go?
Well, there's a little bit of a cheat because I have Eva Tangway in the show, a song called "I Don't Care," and Eva Tangway started out in Holyoke, so it's not quite Boston, but she was one of the biggest performers in vaudeville history, and that was recorded somewhere between 1914 and 1922, but she would have first performed it in 1901. Next past that would have to be just Fred Allen radio recordings
Hmm.
from from the 40s. I think there's some from the 30s. Um, Eventually, I want to do a show that's an old time radio hour show that would include Meet Me at Parky's, which was Albert Brooks's dad was a Boston comedian who had a character called Nick Parkycarkus,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a show on called Meet Me at Parky's, where uh, Parkycarkus was like the owner of this sort of deli, and it was this, the goings on and the comings and goings at the deli. And I have recordings of those, which are hysterical because they happened at the very end of World War II, and the sponsor is, I think, Rolled Gold cigarettes. And it was a time where the spokesperson for Rolled Gold cigarettes was a character on the show. So about 12 minutes into every show, Nick would get a little irritated, and you'd hear, "Don't get irritated. Smoke a rolled gold." And then he'd go through the whole spiel of how they're dipped in apple juice, so they're not dry like other cigarettes. And like, what? And
Also, and it tastes good for the kids too.
Yeah,
apple juice.
Because you're getting apple juice, right? Fresh apple juice.
100% apple juice. Thank you.
Right. But since it's the end of World War II, they're also like, because of rationing, you might not be able to get rolled gold cigarettes right now, but soon.
And
just hold on to those ration cards; they'll be good.
And as we know, Park Yurkakis died doing something he loved.
Yes, and that's another thing. Right. Jeff Abraham wrote a book about the people who have died on stage, so that story's well told in that. He died on stage at a what was it? A tribute to Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
Mm-hmm.
But I always reference that because we talk about his son's take on people coming up to him and telling him,
Bob Einstein,
Bob Einstein,
Super Dave Osborne tells the story. Yes, but about how people say that at least your dad died doing what he loved, and his retort what does your mother do? Is she? She's a housewife. Well, I hope that one day when she's just washing dishes in front of her kitchen sink, in front of the open window, looking out in the yard, that somebody just puts a bullet right in her head so that she dies doing what she loves.
Yeah, but Albert was a little more
reflective
about it than Bob Einstein was.
Oh man, so it's funny. The first time I want to talk about the Ding Ho for just 1 second.
Sure.
We had the great Tony V on the podcast, and I was asking, him, amazing backstory. He started off as a social worker.
Yeah.
And if you hear his comedy, it's not like a lot of people of his age. He is not what I would, in no way is he a quote unquote woke comic, but he's just never gone to sleep. Like he's never been a punching down person. That's never been part of who he is. But I was asking him about how do you go from social work to comedy? And he's like, the hours suited me better. And he tells this story how, they shut the door like Sunday night, Thang Ho wasn't open on Mondays. It was open Tuesdays through Sundays. Mm-hmm. And he finishes up his set on Sunday. And then, like always, they start playing cards in the back room. And he's playing cards. He gets a tap on the shoulder, a couple hours into playing cards. And somebody says, Tony, you're on next. He goes, what are you talking about? We just closed. And the guy says, Tony, it's Tuesday. I lost 2 days. And I've said this before. Anybody who has ever performed at the Ding Ho, the fact that they're doing comedy now is amazing. But what's more amazing is that they're alive. Like how did any of them get out of that place alive?
Yeah, there's definitely the wild times of the Ding Ho, but there's also another aspect of it that I've been trying to sort of find an answer for, the idea of what people think a Boston comic is. And there's definitely like that fast talking white guy kind of thing that we're known for in Boston, but that wasn't really. Like the thing that I say in 100 years of Boston comedy is that I asked Stephen Wright what all of them had in common in the 80s. And he said, we're all on the surface of the earth at the same time. Like, thanks, Stephen.
No, because you can't put all those comics and that's a brilliant thing about it. You break them down into different categories of comedy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one thing I'm hoping to show with Boston Comedy Radio as well. I mean, there are different theme shows. There's a show for 80s comics. There's a show for 90s comics. There's a music comedy show called Riffs. There's a clean comedy hour. But there's also certain times of the day where it's just sort of an auto spinning, where you can hear Fred Allen and next to Patrice O'Neill, next to the Steamy Bohemians, next to David Cross, next to Gary Gulman, next to the last album that Kelly McFarlane put out, next to an album, Drew Dunn's album, people from people who just released albums
So
this week. Josh Gondelman next to Bill Dana. So I'm hoping if you're a fan, if you listen, I see this is the thing that I'm trying to sort of deconstruct for the station now. What do I want to give people versus what people want? And
well,
do they, you got to sort of play something for them to see if they would want it first, because maybe they don't know they want it. I'm not entirely sure if people want all of this stuff mushed together the way it is on some of the shows. I'm kind of hoping they do, because it tickles me when I hear something that's 70 years old next to something that was released that week. When you hear Bob and Ray next to a more modern sketch comedy, I'm hoping that that's delightful for people, and that they'll get a sense of how many different styles and points of view have come through Boston comedy or have ties to Boston comedy.
And again, we can't cover this in a podcast. You can't cover it in a podcast that only covers it. Like, if it depends on how broad you want to make it. Like, people who most people would never hear of, who are amazing writers, like TV writers who've come from here, and sitcom writers, and different writers who either are from Boston. And I can tell you, having worked in the industry, living out there, and being a student, it will never cease to amaze me the number of people who are from here, who are the writers, the greatest writers of comedy, whether they grew up here, and we all have our theories of why so many great comedy writers come from here, or they came through, went to BC, went to Emerson or stuff like that. From the dawn of like telling jokes, this has been the epicenter of funny.
Yeah, I have one of the newer albums in rotation is Aaron Judge live from a show she does at the Ripped Bodice with a co-host there. And next week, well, I don't know when this will air, but October 24th, Queens of the Dead, a zombie film, is premiering in Boston. And that was written by Aaron Judge and Tina Romero, who is George Romero's daughter. So they're carrying on the sort of Romero zombie legacy with a Boston comedian.
Oh.
As
awesome.
One of the writers, which is a sweet spot for me because I'm also a big horror fan. But
so let me pitch you a show for the radio station, if I may. Sure. Joe and I, when we have a comedian on who's, let's say, over 50, we usually start off with a 3-part question. When was your first Dick Doherty show? When is the first time Dick fired you? And how soon after that did Dick call you to do another show?
I have a fourth question. Do you have any Dick Bucks?
Oh, yes, the Dick Bucks.
Right.
Which was to our delight. Not only did John Tobin have his Dick Bucks, he took it off the wall where it's framed, because I guess recently, before at Dick Dave's funeral, at the actual funeral, Mike Donovan just randomly said to him, "Is like, do you have any Dick Bucks?" And Tobin's, who literally worked for Dick for years, said no. And his Dick Buck stories, Nick, I won't bore you with them. That Tobin podcast that we did was probably one of the 5 best we've ever done. But Mike Donovan's like, okay, I'll send you one. And he goes, about 2 or 3 weeks later, Tobin gets a letter in the mail. There's no letter. There's no nothing. It's just a Dick Buck.
Donovan's got everything. Donovan is, I'd imagine his place is like a museum. He's written a book on comedy that everybody who's a Boston comedy fan should read.
He's written a couple. I have the last one, which is great, which is absolutely great.
And of course, just to wrap up the Dick Bucks reference, that's for the audience.
Right. Yes.
An audience. What are they?
There's no audience. I'm pretending. But Dick Bucks were the currency that Dick Doherty generated to pay his comics to use at his own restaurant, basically. So
like drink tickets and stuff.
Right. Exactly. Right. So they were paid in Dick Bucks, which Dick Doherty didn't print on any proprietary colored paper or anything like that. So comics would just photocopy their version of the Dick Bucks, and they would have endless currency to dine on lobster or whatever else was being served at the restaurant of the club.
Confederate dollars. You're not even sure if they're real.
Because Dick had a place, right on the water, kind of over, I guess, where Laugh Boston is now, where the second floor was a fine dining restaurant and downstairs was a comedy club. And one day, Tobin, the show started, the opener's on, and the feature and the headliner aren't there. And somebody said, oh, yeah, they're upstairs. And he runs up to get them, and they're eating lobster on Dick Bucks. And it put the restaurant on. Literally, he was, by trying to screw these comics, you know what I mean? It's but anyway, so a Dick Doherty show, because you do touch on him in the 100 years. But because we moved in high school, we moved to Andover, River Road, where Grill 93 was, which was a Dick Doherty room right down the street. But
for a while it was Ronnie Salvas after that.
Well, and again, either the Tobin version of our podcast or Tony, when Tony talks about the changeover at the Grill 93, So you'll never work for me if you take a job for that. And so Tony's like, okay, he's loyal to Dick. A year later, he's the only one who hadn't done a weekend. And so he's like, so Tony takes a spot, and Dick calls him and says, you're dead to me. It's like, I thought you had integrity. And Tony goes, did I just hear the word integrity out of the mouth of Dick Doherty? This conversation is over. He goes,
he had a weird arc because he made a lot of enemies because he was mercurial, but by the end, he had sort of made peace with everybody in this scene. And then he died of cancer, and his last couple of years, he just spent with him and his wife, I believe in an RV, just sort of touring around. And it seemed like one of the happiest endings in Boston comedy history.
Nick, this is the story we get from all of those guys. He screwed me over. Yeah, he was kind of a dick, but you know what? I have a career because of him. I got stage time. He created a market. He created a market outside of the 5 clubs downtown Boston, which all those guys talk about. You could do literally 5 shows a week, a night going into, but he created, and they will all say that, it's also one of those, I was I got stage time, but all those guys had DUIs. So a young comic, if you wanted to have an opening spot at Grill 93 and you lived in Woburn, well, you had to go down to Quincy to get so-and-so to drive him to the show. So you're in a car an hour and a half, before the show starts, and then an hour and a half after to get your 5-10 minutes. But you got 5-10 minutes, and now you're in a car with this legend talking comedy all night. And now that guy likes you, and all of a sudden he's saying, so they all had those stories. So he was such a fascinating, person. So they all, and like I said, so when he first told Tony, hey, we're going to boycott the play, because like, okay, me and you against the world, I guess, Dick. And then when he took the job and he got mad, about a week later, Tony called him and said, hey, Tony, I need you at the Elks down in Winthrop on Thursday. He's like, I thought you fired me. Yeah, it's in the past. Yeah, the past was 4 days ago.
I think that there's no one in comedy who exemplifies the principle of yes and more than Tony V, both in his life and in comedy. There's a John Gorka song called "I'm from New Jersey," and it's just about people from New Jersey, and one of the lines is something like, "If the world ended today, we would adjust." And I feel like that applies to Tony. If you came to him and said the missiles are coming, he'd be like, okay, what time you want me on? I mean,
and it's funny because I when I talk and when Joe and I talk comedy, I use him as a reference point when people talk about a bad crowd or this or that, and
mhm,
I say, Tony V hasn't walked out of a bad room in 30 years.
right,
He's walked into a shitload of them, but he's not
right,
walked out of a bad room in 40
right.
years because I've seen him. I've had literally the privilege of working with him and seeing him 15 times in the last like year and a half, and the highlight is just talking to him. He's Tony V on and off the stage.
Yeah,
What you see is what you get. It's not he doesn't go into comedian mode.
right.
He is just the most delightful, funniest roll with a person ever. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I
Well,
love anybody more, but so we got the hundred.
it occurs to me just I
Yeah,
just want to get this thought out. Sorry, I
please.
don't mean to interrupt, but it just occurred to me just now how unnerving it would be to see Tony V worried about something. Because if I walked into a room and saw Tony V was nervous, I'd be, oh my God, what's happening? This is the end. This is if it's and I'm sure he has been nervous. I'm sure that there's been that, but I've never seen it, and it would just be it would be like if you want to show me the most terrifying horror film of all time, show me, an hour of Tony V being nervous.
Oh my God, Nick,
That's great.
that is beyond great. So you got the tour going. You got the Boston comedy thing. And now let's talk quickly. The radio station. How did that come about? Like, how did you wake up and say, well, I know all this stuff. I got all this material. I'm gonna go ahead and do this.
Well, it's a confluence of things. I was starting to do a radio show for University at Buffalo called Subject Media. I did that for a little while and realized they were doing that through a platform called Live 365. And then I realized I had some of my own music on a local a Boston music station called Oh Hello Boston, which my friend Suze runs. So I realized, well, it might be fun. How feasible would it be to do this with Boston comedy? And I looked, I have like a pile of stuff in one corner. Do I have enough stuff with the amount of CDs and records that I own? Because it has to all be either commercially released or you need permission from the artist to put it on. So Sue's helped me greatly in because I asked her, what do you do with this? How did you put all of this together? So she helped me sort of navigate putting a station up, and I was planning it for more than a year before I debuted. And it's the kind of thing where I'm putting a lot of time into it, I'm putting a lot of thought into it, and then it gets to 2024, getting close to April of 2024. And I'm thinking, I've just got to pull the trigger and make this live and start telling people about it because I'm loading content in, I'm doing voiceovers, I'm trying to plan how I'm going to tell people about this. So just April 1st, 2024 at midnight, Boston Comedy Radio went live. And uh, it's it's the type of thing where when I tell people about it, sometimes they think it's just a podcast. So there's still sort of a conceptual barrier that I have to get through sometimes, telling people, no, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can listen to it at any time. It's about 100 years of recorded Boston radio history. And I'm always still searching record stores for new stuff. I mean, I like to throw some weird tracks in there. Leonard Nimoy's Legend of Bilbo Baggins is in there because he grew up in Scully Square.
Brilliant.
Yeah, there's some Harvard a cappella stuff in there. There's some Harvard Lampoon stuff in there. Just the trying to find, in addition to Bill Burr and Stephen Wright and Paula Poundstone and Janine Garofalo and Bo Burnham and all of the stuff people might associate with Boston comedy. I've tried to shape the station so that it has some things maybe somebody doesn't expect, and so hopefully somebody may find their new favorite thing because it was next to they
That's
started
great.
listening because something they liked, because they heard something they already knew and liked, and then something different came after that they weren't expecting.
What was the very first thing you played?
The very first thing I played was the Comedians National Anthem by Micah Sherman and Mike Kaplan, which they used to open shows with, which was them doing the national anthem, but reciting every hack premise that a comedian, what's the deal, airplane food, like all of that was the first thing that I played on the station
On April Fool's Day.
on April Fool's Day, which I started to maybe regret a little bit, saying, trying to promote this thing starting, like a couple of weeks before. I'm like, are people gonna think this is actually starting, or are they gonna think that I'm
It's an April
make,
Fool's joke.
yeah, that it's an April Fool's
You
joke?
know,
But
like my wife 20 years ago had said, Bill Murray, and only Bill Murray could do this. Only Bill Murray could do this. Go on a press junket where he goes on Letterman and all the shows promoting Groundhog Day Part 2.
right.
And it's just Groundhog Day. like show a clip from it. Like in all earnest, he could pull that off. That would have been the most brilliant thing ever. But yeah, something like that, the April Fool's launch date.
Yeah.
So Nick, what do you have coming out next? What? I mean, is it growing the station? I mean, book like expand. When are we going to see the 106 years of Boston comedy special that branches out to include like the up and comers like Wayne Russell and Anthony Eugenio. I'm just naming my friends at this point, and Justin George and Dan Cronin, and
Well, I do have other editions of 100 Years of Boston Comedy. If you go to 100yearsofbostoncomedy.com, you can sort of see the event schedule. I have been doing an 80s comedy boom edition of it that features a lot of clips from Bill Gonzalez's YouTube site, because he and Mike McDonald chronicled so much of what happened in the 80s with clips for, like, Mike McDonald had a show on Tufts, at Tufts, that he used to do, and
WMFO.
he used to. I mean, you can see uh, a lot of different people. You see very early Brian Kiley on there. You can see Lauren Dombrowski doing characters. Uh, you can see just there's a lot of stuff on Bill Gonzalez's YouTube station. It's a must see if you're a local fan. So it features a lot of clips from that with his and Mike's blessing. I haven't debuted it yet, but I've also got a lecture on vaudeville, Boston and beyond, because some important things happened. And that I recently did the Saugus Public Library, and their librarian had suggested maybe doing something with just behind the scenes stories. So I I'm putting together, it's not quite a lecture. I'm trying to weave my own personal stories, like when I interviewed Carl Reiner in his living room and he made fun of me for having a Costanza wallet. Telling Bob Newhart about an email I got that somebody was surprised I hadn't changed the thing that I wrote about him this week because he's dead. And Bob Newhart saying, "Oh yeah, I get that a lot." Uh, and some of the things where I've done stand up myself or improv for a story. So I'm working on a sort of behind the scenes thing, trying to make that tell stories without being completely like showbiz self-indulgent kind of that. I'm also working on a book that would be a lot more detailed about 100 years of Boston comedy because there's only so much you can stuff.
And an hour show. Do you think? Do you think? Do you have a sense of irony where most of the lectures that I see that you have posted are at libraries, and the great Fred Allen, had he not pursued comedy, would have been a librarian.
That's that's one of
Yeah.
the things that I say, especially in the Boston Public Library, because that's where he started,
Yeah.
and he found a book on comedy history, and he saw that vaudeville was going on around him, and he made more money doing vaudeville than he would have because he was a stack boy. At Bates Hall, he would fetch books. People would request books, and he would fetch them and bring them to them. People who were reading or studying at Bates Hall in the Boston Public Library.
I mean, I do love that, Nick. Yeah, I mean, there's like 20 versions of this I would like to do with you. I would like to go down your list of the people you've interviewed along the way. Like you had mentioned before we start recording and stuff like that. You are a fascinating person. But the last couple of things I wanna ask you. I mean, do you still enjoy going out and seeing comedy?
Yes, I do. Uh, I'm a little more old and tired now, so sometimes I have to back off a show. But I saw two shows Friday night at the Rockwell. The Nova Comedy Collective did their Halloween show, which was a lot of fun. It was a Rocky Horror spoof. But before that, there was a traveling musician by the name of Rashadicus, who calls himself a cello goblin, who speaks in goblin and plays cello and kazoo simultaneously like a pack of bumblebees from hell. I love seeing that. It's something once you once you've seen it once, it sticks in your head, and I love finding something, after 28 years that surprises me that oh well, I have no precedent for a cello goblin in my research to this point. So that delights me to see something.
A subgenre you weren't aware of.
Yeah, and I interviewed people from Nova Collective and Rashadicus, I'm going to put both of those up this week on the station because I do short interviews called field reports that are usually under 10 minutes, but sometimes they sprawl a little bit. Just going to the clubs and talking to people about what their show is. Like I just went to the Black Comedy Explosion. It was Jonathan Gates' 62nd birthday, and it was also I don't know what it occurs to me I didn't check what the language on this podcast is. If you have,
it's explicit, we can do it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was his. He also made it a fuck cancer night, so people wore pink
Nice.
For cancer awareness because his mother had died of breast cancer a few years ago. So I talked to him outside about the Black Comedy Explosion and the history of that, and he wound up calling a couple of people over and saying, "You shouldn't talk to me about the show. You should talk to the customers, the people who come see the show." And he called it, so half of the interview is a couple of people who had seen the show and why they loved Jonathan Gates and the Black Comedy Explosion. So I have to I have to sometimes gear up a little more if I'm going to do 3 or 4 shows in a week, whereas as a younger man, uh, early on reporting with the Globe, I could be out many nights.
Right.
Uh, I have to be home a couple of nights these days, but when the festival's in town, that's a 7 day that's 7 nights of comedy. I gear myself up and then sort of die for a week after that.
Yeah, I don't know
it's like
how
training for the
McHugh does it.
marathon. Yeah.
Right. McHugh. All right, so the last thing I'm going to leave you at, with the risk of alienating everybody not on your list, do you got like who are some of your all-time favorites? Like if you had a starting lineup, are there some people that, it's either their comedy speaks to you or just do you have some favorites of favorites, or do you not want to put out that list and have hurt somebody's feelings?
Well, that question always vexes me because I start to break things down. Are you talking vintage comedy? You're talking classic comedy? You're talking Boston? Because I automatically start to split But I'll say if I want to limit it to Boston comedy, I will never not be happy to see Tony V. And when I'm able to see him and Bobcat Goldthwait together, because early on, one of the I think a definitive moment for me was Bobcat's Share the Warmth special, which I rented a lot on VHS as a kid. Uh, and it was just this, it was one of the strangest things I'd ever seen. I'm like, it showed me there was something else sort of happening out there that had nothing to do with the necessarily the HBO specials that I had seen at the time or comedians on Carson and Letterman. There was something a little wilder happening. Um, I used to love the Walsh Brothers Great and Secret show, which was another sort of free for all that included a lot of different comics from the area and different sketch and music. That's an all-time favorite. There's a lot of stuff I saw at the comedy studio that I loved when I first got into this scene. Um, I I miss seeing Reverend Tim McIntyre because he was somebody I sort of connected with early on this scene. I always enjoy seeing Janine Garofalo, and she's coming up again in November at Arts at the Armory, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's every time somebody asks me for a succinct, "Hey, who are your favorites?" I ramble like this, so I
it's hard. No,
making this another half hour.
We don't
longer than
condone
intended.
rambling on this podcast.
We
so
like
we're gonna
things
have to ask
laser
you to leave.
focused. None of your HD bullshit. Just streaming. No, it's because
it's that Julia Roberts meme with all of the equations around her. When somebody says, who's your favorite? Like I step back into my head and I'm like,
but yeah, I mean, Nick, I can't. It's way too long, and we getting you on here because I've been a fan about what you've been putting out for a very long time.
well, thank you.
As you know, and I will plug, the fact that I got my Boston Comedy Radio shirt
Yes,
here.
thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I wear it out, and every time I'm at a show, or I've done this thing where I think in the last year I took my kid to like Niagara Falls and I posted from out in the wild and at Universal Studios this summer. I try to plug it because I appreciate so much what you do. I hope like the rest of the community, from the older guard to the guys starting out understand the resources that are out there to help their material grow but at the same time the fact that you promote so much. I mean, I think you tag every comedy flyer that comes across your plate.
I try to do that with the Boston Comedy Radio Instagram.
Yes.
Because that's an extension of showing people that Boston comedy isn't necessarily just one thing. There's a lot of people doing strange things. So I love the idea that people might see a flyer for Lenny Clark at Giggles next to a Men in Comedy Halloween special show.
No, I do. I appreciate what you do. And Joe, you got any final thoughts here, Joe?
Well, thanks, Nick, for coming on to our podcast. It's nice to talk to somebody other than Jacques every once in a while, so it kind of breaks up the monotony.
Well, we're on Zoom, and you do have the brick wall behind you. It makes me think: are you just walled like a Poe story in Jacques' basement somewhere?
I'm trying to go for like an '80s comedy club vibe,
Right.
where you're standing in front of the brick wall.
Blink twice if you need help.
I'm sorry, I had something in my eye. I'm sorry.
Was it both eyes?
Yeah, it's a condition.
Okay.
It's a condition.
All right, 9-1.
It's called podcasteria, and I can't get rid of it. But thank you. So Nick Zaino, please, everybody out there, seek out bostoncomedyradio.com, right?
Yes.
And check out any date that he's performing at any local library at any given moment. Nick Zaino could pop in and do
the comedy shadow. 100
100 years of Boston comedy. And also, is there anything else? Are you on social media that you want to promote, or just
I've got Boston Comedy Radio and 100 Years of Boston Comedy on Facebook and Instagram, and the websites for both. And I continue to write for the Boston Globe. I had something in yesterday's paper about Robbie Roadsteamer getting detained by ICE in Portland, and I'll have something this week about Queens of the Dead coming to Boston, and then after that, something about Grandiloquent, Gary Goldman's new show. So I don't know. I feel as I rattle these things off, I feel myself going, quit talking about yourself. I don't have that gene that some people have to promote, but I've had to sort of get over that because I have things to promote.
Preaching to the choir. I don't know why I'm doing this podcast. I have nothing to promote, but I hate not having to promote anything either. And yet I'm still here doing a podcast. But luckily, I get to meet great people such as yourself, Nick.
Well, thank you.
And hopefully our paths will cross soon. And I don't know how to end a podcast. I don't. This is it. This is this is where the rambling continues. Oh no!
I do that. That happens to me on interviews. Like I'll talk to somebody for an hour and it's great, and I don't want to be like, well, enough of you. Click.
You're right.
It just seems rude. How do you politely end a conversation? And everybody else on the planet seems to have been able to answer that. I don't know why it's so hard when I'm trying to end a conversation. They're like, hey, see you later.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I gotta go now. But it was nice. Yeah. I'm so happy we had this time together.
Nice.
Tugging my ear. What other sign-offs are there? No, you know what? We usually have a standard sign-off that we use on our podcast. Guess what, listeners? Now's the time. This is the moment you've all been waiting for, the end of the podcast. And it's a part of the podcast where I say, don't forget.
Wake up in the morning, turn on my TV. Weather says it's gonna rain all week. Get in my car and I head off to work, and everybody on the road is a flaming frickin' jerk. Get cut off twice by an SUV swerving in my lane. I get a clip fender and a dirty look, and other strangers hate it. I can't explain. I'm so hard to deal with. Why does everybody wanna mess with me? I'm the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. Still everyone's offended every time I speak. I'm so hard to deal with. Why does everybody wanna mess with me? Get to my job and my boss is in my ear. He tells me I'm a worker, not a peer. But I can't help it if I've got better ideas. Why does no one recognize what I've known for years? Tell me I've got a bad attitude and my future's not too bright. I get a pissed off lecture and a dirty look, and I never even have a chance to fight. Politics, wars, and household chores, there's no rest when you can't ignore the truth. I'm just saying what's on my mind, but it turns into a struggle every time. I'm not saying I'm better, just that everyone else seems worse. Man, it is so hard living with this curse. I'm so hard to deal with. Why does everybody want to mess with me? I'm the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. Still everyone's offended every time I speak. I'm so hard to deal with. Why does everybody want to mess with me?
morning, dishes in the sink. Tuesday's takeout boxes stinky. Change my shirt, doorbell rings. My girl's waiting there, looking forward to an evening in. She steps inside and the nose wrinkles up in her eyes get small. I get a pissed off lecture and a dirty look and she leaves me there, standing in the hall. I'm so hard to deal with, why does everybody want to mess with me? I'm the nicest guy you've ever wanted, meets to everyone's offended every time I speak. I'm so hard to deal with, why does everybody want to mess with me?
Ready to jumpstart your career? Babson College offers specialized master's programs